I've arranged this in sections based on a sheet that I found on the internet from the New South Wales government about grooming children. Sexual predators, what do they do to groom their children? And the things that I found fit perfectly in every category. As I said before, all of these you can get on email, but I don't think they'll be in the same spot. Some of them will be because they're actual books or different pamphlets and you'll be able to find them. But they're hard to access. For instance, I had to put in my Victorian Institute of Teaching registration number to access this stuff. I know that you guys can get it, but I think you have to pay for it and you have to say who you are. Like, it's really weird. No other curriculums are like that. You can just, all the maths books that are online, you can just look at them. There's nothing else that's hidden like this. It's very, very suspicious. Alright, so first of all, steps to groom a child. You have to sexualise the relationship through conversation, expose the child to sexual material and images, and then shape the child's sexual preferences by manipulating what the child finds exciting. So you have to understand that when they see these sexual images, they're going to be sexually aroused in some level, a lot of them, and then they're going to start questioning their sexuality. Some people would say that's by design, you know. So there is a paper survey that you can hand out to students, which they have to complete, and it records the students' sexual experiences with and willingness to try various sexual acts, such as threesomes, using dildos, and there are only 3 options. There's a picture of a toy box, there's a recycling bin, and there's a fridge. So there's no. So the fridge is like later, I'll try it later. There's no. There's no option for no, not ever. I don't ever want to do that. Now, I was so this was the first resource I stumbled across which made me look up the rest, and I was so outraged I wrote an article about it, and it got published in The Spectator if you want to read it, and you can actually see, it has links to it. It's from transmissioneducation.com.au. Last time I looked, you can go from the Department of Education website to that website. Do you know who sponsors it? Ansell, the condom company. It goes from the Department of Education to Ansell, to their, school resources, something or other, and you can click on transmissioneducation.com.au. But after my article, you got to that point and it wouldn't open. I've downloaded the resources, so if you want them, I can still email them to you. That's worksheet 4 if you do find it yourself. So there are graphic descriptions in this for 15-year-olds of analingus and cunnilingus, so it actually goes in to describe what each of these is. And then there are dozens of conversation starters in other resources now, like little scenarios to discuss that depict young people as hyper-sexualised, careless and emotional. So that was all throughout the curriculum. Young people are just, there's no celibate young people, there's no young people who have had one sexual partner or who hadn't had any, and they're interested but they're waiting, or, kind of more normal stuff. I understand that kids are way more sexually active, so I think telling them about sex ed in Year 9 sadly is too late, about STIs and stuff. I do think that's too late because they're doing it already a lot of the time and they're just so exposed. But this stuff, it's glorified is the word I'm looking for. And so that those students, which are still in the majority who would have a more ordinary sex life, shall we say, that actually doesn't have anything really in it, most kids aren't sexually active. It's still a small proportion, but they do start earlier. But they're going to feel like freaks reading this stuff. They're going to think, why haven't I had sex with males, females, one-night stands, and at the age of 14, why haven't I had 5 sexual partners? And no judgment is allowed. You've got to be sex positive. There's no judgment allowed. There's no sexual ethics other than consent. Okay, there's a 16-year-old in one of these who began having sex at 13, and there is no mention of statutory rape. If I ever read that in a book, I would immediately look up in the book and say, guys, there's a law against that. They mention there's a new resource, I don't actually have it here, but I just read it the other day, for primary schools. So the rule is that you can have sex, I think it's from 10 or 12, but only if the person who you're having sex with is within 2 years of your age, above you. And so they're telling primary school children that this is when you can start having sex with each other, so long as the person who you're going to have sex with isn't more than 2 years older than you. They don't say that rule was made to stop children from having a criminal record, even though it's mutually abusive, or at least abusive from one side. it's presented as a green light to go and have sex. It's all against what I think most parents would want. The way it's presented. So they're like, we're just telling them the law. Yeah, but if you read the way it's presented, they're encouraging kids to go and have sex. I wouldn't be saying that. If I was a primary school teacher, I would always say you shouldn't be having sex. If anyone tries to have sex with you, you need to let someone know. They shouldn't be doing that. That's what I would say. But apparently now I'm going against the law or something like that. So a lot of these next ones are from Building Respectful Relationships, which I actually think is worse than the stuff I read in the Safe Schools stuff. So there's a 17-year-old girl who has had 15 sexual partners of various genders. There are portrayals of casual sex with strangers, cheating on partners, getting sexually transmitted infections is the norm. And I'll read you a quote about that down lower. And as though students with a less promiscuous or risky sexual history were abnormal. So there are various role-playing activities where Year 7 and 8 students are asked to publicly role-play sexually active 16 and 17-year-old gay, bisexual and very promiscuous characters. And one of them even came with a warning, something that I've never ever seen before or since in a school resource. I'm just going to read it very carefully to you, okay? This is from it. The warning says, after the activity, to de-roll, ask the students their real names, how they are feeling right now and where they are. This is important to ensure none of the role players has slipped into a state of distress or disassociation. If anyone is a bit off or clearly distressed, ask them to step outside and ask what they need to help them feel more in control. It could be fresh air or a drink. I am not running an activity where my students could disassociate in front of me and then imagine I can remedy the situation with a drink of water. I mean, that is insane. But they knew it was going to upset children to that ridiculous level. I mean, it's ridiculous. Okay, the next step is to take an undue interest in the child's sexual development. Well, what have I just described? So prior to these programs, if students displayed sexualised behaviour, language or knowledge that was inappropriate to their age kind of thing, I would rightly be obliged under mandatory reporting laws to tell my coordinator. But now as a teacher, I'm just being encouraged to participate in these discussions. Most parents would be deeply troubled by teachers viewing children's innocent, growing physical and intellectual understanding about their bodies as sexual, especially very young ones. It's wrong in my opinion. Adults, just random teachers at school, shouldn't be so interested in other people's children's sexual development. They've got other things to do. I can tell you that from being a teacher. There are plenty of other things we could be doing. So here are some quotes. This one was so disturbing to me, especially as a parent. Just keep in mind I've got a 4-week-old baby and this offends me deeply. This is a quote from Building Respectful Relationships, Stepping Out Against Gender-Based Violence. And I quote, "Sexuality is how people feel and express themselves as sexual beings. Sexuality is an integral part of life. It starts at birth and ends only when we die. They have sexual organs. That doesn't mean that they are erotic sexual beings." The other thing I want to mention to you is that you should all look up Alfred C. Kinsey. He is from the United States who did research which we are using everywhere. I keep seeing it. They keep saying little boys masturbate and have erections from birth, and little girls can lubricate, they say, from birth. Now, where did they get that from? Who on earth thinks that? If you speak to doctors about little boys and erections, it's about keeping it healthy and making sure there's blood flow every day to it. It's just a health thing. It's not an erotic sexuality thing, for goodness sakes. And that's because Alfred C. Kinsey basically got a bunch of pedophiles to sexually assault little children who are a few months old and record their reactions. And they recorded things like screaming as orgasms. Like, it's horrendous reading. It's in chapter 5 if you want to read it, his actual research. It's out there. I mean, it is so upsetting to read. It is so upsetting. And that is literally what we are basing our research on about children being sexual beings. And therefore, because they are sexual, erotic beings, we need to teach them about erotic sex at school. This is literally how they have justified putting it in primary school and kinder. So that's from a one where I found kinder resources, that one. So what I'm about to read for you next is from a book called Pants Aren't Rude, which you can buy. It's another resource, Children's Sexual Development and Behaviour, which is recommended for teachers of early childhood, which is kinder and prep 1-2. Sexual play is a normal part of child development in every society. In the primary years, it may include simulated intercourse with clothes on. No. That's where I report mandatorily that this child has possibly been abused or someone's doing something inappropriate in front of or talking to the child a bit inappropriately. This is where parents can step in and then help look after their child because something has gone wrong. It's not a wonderful thing that happened. Here's another one. This is one that I put in my next article because I was so horrified. If a primary school aged child asks, "What is a clitoris?" answer with, "A little round bump, about as big as a pea, which is just above the opening to where the wee comes out. It feels good when you touch it." Why would you add that at the end? How creepy is that? I'm sorry. And if a primary school kid asked me that, I'd say, "Sorry, what do you think it means?" Because I bet you they've misheard something. I wouldn't firstly assume that they even said that correctly and meant that word. My daughter, my little 2-year-old, was standing at my back door yesterday saying, "Shit, shit." And I looked at her, but she was telling my dog to sit. You know, like, I'm not going to assume that a child, and if I find out that the kid knows exactly what it is, then yeah, I would let the parents know. I'd say, "Well, that's one of your private areas. It's just part of your, your vagina." I might say it's part of your vagina and move on. And then I would let the parents know that this has happened, or I'd say, "Who told you that word?" You know. But I would never just go, "That's a great question. Blah 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 blah." That's not what my response would be. And I had been operating on the basis that I thought that's what parents wanted me to do. That's what I would want a teacher to do for my children. If a primary school aged child asks, "What is masturbation?" answer with, "It is when you stroke your penis or clitoris and it feels good." If a primary school aged child asks me, "What is masturbation?" I would definitely be thinking, what is going on there? I'd say, "Well, that's not appropriate for me to talk to you about. I'd like to know who told you that word." And that's something for your parents to talk to you about, not me. And no other, and then I'd go into a little diatribe about how nobody who's not your mum or your dad, just out of protective instinct. So here's another one. If a preschooler, so this is kinder, asks, "What is the vagina?" answer with, "A special passage where the baby comes out, in between where wee and poo come out. It is also where the man's penis goes during sexual intercourse. It will probably be helpful to draw a picture." You think a kinder kid is going to know what intercourse means? Or sexual even? Why would they know that? Why would I draw a picture of sex for a kinder kid? Why would I draw a little pornographic cartoon for a... Who is writing this stuff? Well, that's another story, isn't it? You could look up Gary Dowsett, Stephen Angelides. Gary Dowsett was the deputy director at the La Trobe faculty where this was made, and they've come out and said, "Oh, no, he wasn't involved." I'm sorry, the Victorian government, the Labor Party, contracted a department where this man was the deputy director to write the sex education for our children, and he is on record in 2 magazines saying that pedophilia needs to be part of the gay movement. And, the taboo around it needs to be taken away. That man is someone that I would never trust anywhere near anybody's child. That should have been a public relations nightmare. What is our media doing? I'm really disappointed with our media after I've had a few interviews with them too. A few times I was, spoken to by the media, and they never asked me for my evidence, ever. They just asked me what my stance was, and then they wrote me up as a homophobe. And I was thinking, if you thought I was... or they'd say, "Well, and Safe School says that's just all a myth." And so that's their idea of a balance. And I'm like, why didn't you just ask me for my evidence? You could have destroyed me yourself. But they didn't, and I think, I've got it, don't you? Or you don't want to know that I've got it, because then you'd have to write about it. I don't know. So I personally believe there is a bit of a place for sex ed in schools with parental consent and within reason. That's my view. People can disagree. But I obviously always believe in parental consent. And I think it should be, just the basics. So the next step is, so obviously I don't think you should use sex toys and starting kinder. So the next step to grooming a child is to tell the child that the acts will not hurt them. And as I said before, the warnings are gone. So here is a quote. This is from -18, the website. It's called, so you got an STI, now what? Funny little title for a book. Here's the quote. Contracting such STIs is just a part of life as a sexually active individual. They changed it. It used to be getting STIs is a normal part of sex. And they changed it to contracting STIs is just a part of life as a sexually active individual. I'm not in any danger of getting STIs. I'm a sexually active individual. There are ways you can be a sexually active individual with no risk at all. But apparently not. Here's the other one. Contracting an STI is not as terrible as you may have expected. In fact, it's not terrible at all. There's nothing wrong with having an STI. It doesn't make you undesirable. Yes, it does. That is why you get testing and you get it fixed. If it didn't make you undesirable and there was nothing wrong with it, why would you get tested and fix it? And it is terrible because you can become infertile, you can spread it around, you can be a carrier and be infecting people. I mean, they just said STI. They didn't even say the tame ones. I mean, that's including everything. That's AIDS. In the UK, they've got a new strain of syphilis, apparently, that's resistant to treatment. Syphilis! I thought that was a medieval issue. I mean, there is something wrong with the way young people are having sex. It's unhealthy for themselves. Porn is discussed as a healthy sexual aid, with no mention of its highly addictive nature, questionable morality, or widely acknowledged detrimental effect on relationships. Because there's no judgment in this curriculum. Everything is wonderful, so long as you all agree. Anal sex, in particular, is promoted over and over, with no mention of the risks, and I mean no mention of the extra risks from anal sex, like the permanent damage to the sphincter, which even many gay men decide to avoid having anal sex because of. Like, that is over and over. For girls, for boys, everyone's encouraged to try that. Like, it's just equal to everything else. I was told ages ago by a nurse, and I asked what something was, and it was basically, I don't actually know the proper name, but it was a tampon basically. It looked like a tampon, but it was for people who had broken their sphincter, and they had to have a way of keeping their feces inside because it was broken. It's not like the vagina, it's not the same. And also, it's not the same amount of skin cells. Apparently it's a thinner layer of skin cells, so you're more likely to bleed, you're more likely to get infected with something. I mean, none of that is in there. If you're going to say go have anal sex, you say, but wait, there are risks. I mean, there's got to be ways to do it more safely, I don't know. Okay, but there's no help for them. They're just thrown out there to have an adventure with no armour, no defences. It's negligent, in my opinion. So our students are being sold an exciting erotic adventure to go on, with the only safety advice being to get regular testing to monitor and manage, not to avoid STIs. Sexual ethics beyond consent, as I said, are just not there. There's a basic duty to inform partners about STIs. I've seen two different resources. One of them said basically you need to, and one of them questioned it. Like maybe you shouldn't have to because that's your private medical information. Why should you have to tell someone that? They're taking a risk, having sex with you. The risk is on them. Like, that was the discussion. And I just thought, there's a law. You have to tell them. It's not up for debate. It's up for debate actually in America and lots of places, but it's still a law here. So the concepts of age of consent, they're continually, the boundaries on age of consent are pushed. So there was one girl who was, it was that girl that had sex and they didn't talk about age of consent. There was a quote after her little paragraph which said, "It's nobody's business if I like sex." So it's nobody's business if a 13-year-old likes sex. It's nobody's business, except apparently all the people who want the teachers to be all up in the business about it, as long as it's positive. You know, it's what if it's the parents' business? What if it's someone's business to care that it might not be being done under, with consent? Who knows? So the idea that they could psychologically do damage to themselves or others is barely touched upon. Okay, so the next step. So it won't hurt you and it won't hurt anyone else. That's what they're told, basically. The next step is to alienate the child from their parents and family. So students are literally advised to request that their school remove filters on the internet for pornographic sites. And it says in there, if your parents block them at home, ask a teacher to remove the filter just for you. I wouldn't remove a filter at school ever, for anything. I wouldn't do that. Because who knows where they'd go, and then I would be responsible. And I definitely wouldn't do it on the basis of, your parents won't let you. Well, here, I'm more important than your parents. I know better than your parents. I'll do it for you. Some teachers really do think they're that cool and that important. I don't, because I'm a parent, possibly, I don't know. But even before I was a parent, I didn't think this. Here's the quote. "Some students don't have access to the internet at home, or it is monitored by their family, so having access at school is really important." That's what the quote afterwards. So here's one that is very disturbing. So this is one of the resources. It was presented, you can see it on the internet. It was entitled "Gender Affirming Schools Towards Safe Schools for Gender Diverse and Transgender Young People in Australia." And so they were praising the testimony of this one student who began transitioning to another gender without parental consent. This was the quote. "My teachers broke multiple rules to allow me to leave school without my parents' permission for medical appointments." And now they don't even have to leave the school grounds with the Doctors in Schools program. So the language of the programs is very alarming. Children are referred to as sexual agents and mature minors. Both are proper legal concepts, which I didn't know until a lawyer told me, actually. So even I didn't understand how serious that was. And those laws are there to protect children from exploitation, but they're just being removed. So here is the quote about helping a child transition without parental consent. "The person who understands most about their gender transition or affirmation is the student themselves. Consideration should be given to the age and maturity of the student and whether it would be appropriate to involve the student's parents in each decision." How come I get to decide if it's appropriate? "If a student does not have a family or carer support for the process, a decision to proceed should be made based on the school's duty of care for the student's well-being." Or you can just read that as, well, because are you allowed to say no? You're not. No. It's in the Department of Education website. "And their level of maturity to make decisions about their needs. It may be possible to consider the student a mature minor and able to make decisions without parental consent." End quote. That's only some of the resources, and this was from a while ago, and they've made worse resources since then. Obviously, I disagree with it all because I think teachers should be supporting families. We should be helping families get along, not further dividing them. If they have a difficult issue like a child with gender dysphoria, or perhaps, there's a Christian family with a child who is gay. But we shouldn't be getting in the middle and further dividing that family. We should just be doing whatever we can to support them, to get along, however they work it out. And we shouldn't be betraying and undermining them. I believe in strengthening family ties, not weakening them.